Berlin, 1923. Two men walk into the same bakery. The first man carries a briefcase. Inside it, 1,000,000 marks. Printed by the government, signed, stamped, completely legal. He leaves with nothing. The second man carries a single cigarette, unlit, slightly crumpled, worth nothing to a non-smoker. He leaves with a loaf of bread, a handful of matches, and an address scrawled on the back of a receipt. Someone who will trade butter for tobacco. Same morning, same bakery, completely different outcomes. Here's the question nobody asks. If the money was worthless, what was the cigarette? We're taught to believe that money is the foundation of civilization, that without it, things collapse into chaos. And here's where history gets interesting, because it doesn't collapse into chaos. It collapses into something older, something more honest. Every time in human history, and there are dozens of cases, when a currency has died, people don't stop trading. They don't panic into paralysis. They reach backward, into a layer of commerce that was always there, buried just beneath the surface. And what they find is not gold, not always, not barter in the textbook sense either. What they find is a shadow economy running on trust, scarcity, and the one resource that never inflates: necessity. This is the story of what money really is, and what survives when it isn't. Part 1, the cigarette economy. Germany, 1923, the Weimar Republic. At its peak, inflation was doubling prices every 4 days. A newspaper that cost 1 mark in 1921 cost 70 billion marks by November 1923. People brought wheelbarrows of cash to buy groceries. A man who left his wheelbarrow of money outside a shop returned to find the money dumped on the sidewalk and the wheelbarrow stolen. They didn't want the money. They wanted the wheelbarrow. But here's what the economics textbooks skip over. Inside this disaster, a parallel system emerged almost immediately. Cigarettes became currency, not because everyone smoked, but because cigarettes had properties that paper marks no longer had. They were portable, divisible, recognizable, and, crucially, they couldn't be printed by a government losing its mind. A pack of American Lucky Strikes could buy you a night's accommodation in 1923 Berlin. 2 packs could get you a doctor's visit. 10 packs could rent you an apartment for a month. Economists call this a commodity money shift, but it's more profound than that. This is the first law of monetary collapse. When official currency fails the trust test, people don't abandon the concept of money. They rebuild it instantly, from whatever is most scarce and most useful. The cigarette wasn't valuable because it was a cigarette. It was valuable because everyone agreed it was valuable. Sound familiar? Part 2, what happens in the gaps. Yugoslavia, early 1990s. The Socialist Federal Republic is fracturing. War is breaking out across the Balkans. And the dinar, the national currency, is being printed at a rate that would make even Weimar economists flinch. Monthly inflation hit 2 trillion % in January 1994. That's not a typo. 2 trillion %. Now imagine you're a dentist in Belgrade. Your patients still have toothaches. You still have the skill, but the money they pay you with today will be worth half as much by the time you leave the clinic. So what do? You stop accepting dinars. And you start accepting German Deutsche Marks, a foreign currency, technically illegal to use in commerce at the time. You accept fuel. You accept food. You accept promises of labor. A mechanic fixes your car. You fill a cavity. No money changes hands. No receipt. No government involvement. The underground economy didn't replace the official economy. It preceded it. And here's the part nobody tells you. These informal economies don't just survive crises, they outlast them. Economists who studied Yugoslavia's collapse found that the shadow networks forged in those years became the foundation of new, legitimate businesses once stability returned. The relationships built under desperation became the trust networks of reconstruction. This is the second law. In the absence of institutional money, social capital becomes the real currency. Who do you know? Who owes you? Who vouches for you? Those questions matter more than your bank balance when the bank is burning. Part 3, the prison economy. Here's a controlled experiment that economists love. Put a group of people in an enclosed environment. Eliminate official currency entirely. Watch what happens. They did this experiment repeatedly. It's called prison. In the 1940s, economist R.A. Radford was a prisoner of war in a German camp. When he got out, he wrote one of the most important papers in economic history. He described how, within days of prisoners arriving, a sophisticated marketplace emerged. First, it was cigarettes. Again. Then it evolved. Chocolate for tea. Tea for safety. Safety for information. Information for access to certain prisoners with useful skills or useful connections. When the Red Cross deliveries arrived irregularly, the entire price system fluctuated in real time. The price of a cigarette fell when a new delivery arrived. Rose when supplies ran thin. Speculators emerged. People who'd trade 3 cigarettes now for 5 cigarettes in a week. An informal banking system in a prison camp built in days. What Radford documented wasn't primitive behavior. It was pure economic behavior, stripped of every institutional layer. And what it proved was this: the market is not a human invention. It is a human instinct. You cannot turn it off. You can only redirect it. When governments eliminate money, people don't become passive. They become creative. But here's where the story gets uncomfortable. We've been talking about cigarettes, butter, chocolate, practical commodities, things with obvious utility. But history shows that when currencies die for long enough, something else starts to trade. Something that tells us far more about human nature than any textbook wants to admit. The commodities that hold value, the longest in a collapsing system, not the ones most useful. They're the ones most feared to lose. Part 4, Argentina and the dollar beneath the mattress. Argentina, December 2001. The peso is collapsing. The IMF is walking away. The government freezes all bank accounts. The corralito, to prevent capital flight, middle-class Argentines, people with savings, people who did everything right, wake up one morning to find their money is locked, inaccessible, possibly gone. Within weeks, a brutal new hierarchy emerges. At the top, US dollars, held in cash, hidden inside walls, under floorboards, sewn into mattresses. Not because dollars were especially stable, they weren't, but because they were foreign. They existed outside Argentine jurisdiction. No Argentine government could freeze what wasn't in an Argentine bank. Below dollars, real estate, then durable goods, refrigerators, vehicles, anything with a secondary market. At the bottom, peso savings, worthless paper, the currency of people who had trusted the system. And here's the psychological layer that nobody talks about. The Argentines who survived 2001 best weren't the richest. They were the most distrustful. The ones who had never fully believed the government when it said everything was fine. The ones who had kept dollars under the bed since the hyperinflation of the 1980s. Their skepticism, which looked like paranoia to their neighbors, was the most rational financial decision they ever made. This is the third law. In monetary collapse, distrust is a feature, not a bug. The cynics win. The believers lose. The country that trusts its institutions most is the country most destroyed when those institutions fail. Part 5, what people truly value. Venezuela, 2018. Inflation reaches 1 million%. Prices double every 19 days. The bolivar is so worthless that street vendors weigh it rather than count it. But inside this catastrophe, a strange tenderness appears. Services begin trading again, like it's the Middle Ages. A doctor who cannot afford supplies accepts meals. A mechanic accepts school supplies for his children. A teacher trades lessons for cooking. Skills, not goods, become some of the most traded commodities. A hairdresser in Caracas during this period described charging per haircut in eggs. Not metaphorically, literally. 3 eggs, medium length. 5 eggs, a full wash and cut. And what's remarkable is not the absurdity of it. What's remarkable is that the hairdresser kept working. She didn't give up. She didn't leave her craft. She adapted the transaction. Across history, across every documented hyperinflation, this pattern repeats. People do not stop wanting what they want. They find new languages to ask for it. This is the fourth law. Human desire is inflation-proof. You cannot devalue hunger. You cannot hyperinflate loneliness. You cannot print too much of the need to feel safe. What dies in a monetary collapse is not the economy. What dies is the fiction that money was ever the foundation. Money was always just the agreed-upon language of desire. When that language corrupts, people find another one. So here's the pattern. Run every case. Weimar Germany, Yugoslavia, Argentina, Venezuela, the POW camp in 1944, and something consistent emerges beneath the chaos. When official money dies, it reveals a hierarchy, not of value, but of trust. At the top, physical objects that cannot be inflated. Cigarettes, gold, foreign currency, durable goods. Below that, skills. Things you carry inside you that no government can confiscate. Below that, relationships. Who owes you? Who trusts you? Who will trade with you at 2 a.m. when the markets are closed? And at the very bottom, paper, promises, numbers, on screens backed by nothing, but faith in an institution that has already broken faith. History is not subtle about this. Every civilization that has experienced monetary collapse has learned the same lesson. What you own is a hedge against what you earn. What you know is a hedge against what you own. And who you know is a hedge against everything else. This is not pessimism. This is archaeology. We dig through the ruins of Weimar and we find cigarettes. We dig through the ruins of Yugoslavia and we find Deutsche Marks hidden in walls. We dig through Argentina's corralito and we find dollars sewn into mattresses. And all of these artifacts are saying the same thing. Trust is the only currency that never fully dies. Not trust in governments, not trust in banks, trust between people. The baker who accepted your cigarette because he knew you. the mechanic who fixed your car because your neighbor vouched for you, the doctor who treated your child because the community would remember. That is the oldest economy on Earth. It predates coins by 10,000 years. And every time the modern financial system fails, human beings remember it instantly, instinctively, as if the knowledge was always there, waiting. Here's what the economists don't put in the textbooks. Money is not wealth. Money is a measurement of wealth, and measurements can lie. They lie when governments print too much. They lie when banks leverage too far. They lie when the number on the screen has no relationship to the thing it claims to represent. But what you can do, what you know, what you've built with the people around you, that doesn't lie. It can't be printed. It can't be frozen in a corralito. It can't be inflated away by a central bank having a bad decade. The cigarette in 1923, Berlin was never really about the cigarette. It was about two people looking at each other across a ruined economy and deciding together what something was worth. That decision, that moment of mutual agreement, that is the oldest financial institution in human history, and it has outlasted every currency ever invented. Every single one. If this made you think differently about what you're actually building, subscribe. We don't just study history here. We perform autopsies.